The Shoba Shebane massacre began at dawn on Christmas Day in 1995 in the hilly area near Port Shepstone. In the decade preceding the attack, the area was the scene of a prolonged struggle between warlords aligned to either the IFP or the ANC. During the massacre, about 600 alleged IFP supporters wielding automatic weapons and pistols descended on the area. 19 people were killed and hundreds injured. The survivors left permanently maimed. On the 21st of March in 1960, police officers opened fire on a group of people peacefully protesting oppressive past laws, killing 69 civilians. More than 5 decades later, members of the South African Police Service killed 34 minors in what became known as the Marikana Massacre. It was the most lethal use of force by the police security forces against civilians since 1976. The massacre has also been compared to the Sharpeville Massacre. More than 20 South Africans were killed during the unrest in Phoenix. Some victims set alight, others shot at close range in an alleged racist attack. The dictionary definition of a massacre is the killing of multiple individuals and is usually considered to be morally unacceptable, especially when perpetrated by a group of political actors against defenseless victims. Other definitions have described it as the intentional killing of a considerable number of human beings under circumstances of atrocity or cruelty or contrary to the usages of civilized people. But for the past 2 weeks, the term has been used on various platforms to describe the brutal killings of more than 20 South Africans in Phoenix. According to a preliminary report by the South African police, they are investigating 35 murder cases linked to the unrest 2 weeks ago. But the report also detailed that 40 bodies had been found in Phoenix and surrounding areas. Since the unrest in Phoenix, 11 suspects have been arrested and have appeared in the Verulam Magistrates Court. Most victims were allegedly killed by vigilante groups who claimed they were protecting the area. However, some of those slain were said to have been looking for fuel stations during the unrest, others returning from late-night shifts, and most victims passing through Phoenix. But is this term being used loosely? Experts share their views. Guy Lamb, the Director of Safety and Violence Initiative, SAVI, says more information is needed to make a proper conclusion. Lamb says a commission of inquiry should be established to make a determination.
We still need to get all the facts together before we can talk about it as a massacre. I think at this particular point in time, we need to refer to it as an incident of mass violence, because there were the use of firearms were used, but also there seems to be in the use of kind of blunt force instruments as well, the use of petrol to burn people. So it's not just firearms involved here, but certainly mass violence. It's either happened in multiple locations or a few locations, but certainly we need to get all the facts together before we can call it a massacre. I think there's a desperate need for it within, a focus on KwaZulu-Natal and parts of Gauteng, but also a need to look at the intelligence services, a need to look at the police, and how do we rebuild from here. Here is an opportunity to look at where things went wrong and how do we make sure this doesn't happen again in the future.
Dr. Rama Naidu, Head of Democracy and Development Studies at UKZN, says the correct term should be a mob insurrection.
That word is laden, and people use different contexts for it. And most certainly, if you look at the way in which some of those murders happened, you cannot but look at it and say that person was massacred. He was defenseless. A mob of people got there and they beat him to death, or he was shot. That can't be condoned. And to the family of the people says, yes, my child was massacred. And I think we need to understand that context. I don't want us to not validate what happened here. I'm not trying to do that. I'm simply saying right now, this feeling of fueling this into something much bigger is not helping the situation. because it'll divide us so much that I will not even be able to talk to you. And if we can't have a conversation about it and get past it, then we just get stuck into our normal spaces, and you become the other and I become the other. And so it'll just wait for the next incident to happen and it'll spark again. As we've seen, right? Everything in this country has a racial overtone. So every incident that happens, immediately the race thing comes. Because as a nation, we have not really created spaces to talk about these things in powerful ways, to share our hurt, our pain, our fears, our joy.
David Bruce is an independent researcher specializing in policing and public security. He has written extensively on police violence in South Africa. From 2016 to 2018, he was a member of the panel of experts appointed by the Minister of Police on the recommendations of the Marikana Commission of Inquiry. Bruce believes that the weakness of police accountability in South Africa contributed to widespread panic.
Instigators who were responsible for creating that climate of chaos. There was what appears to have been some type of insurrection taking place. And so one of the questions that we should consider here is just the possibility that people are honing in on the events in Phoenix as a way of diverting attention from what is in some ways the primary question here, which is about holding those who were responsible for the overall course of events accountable for their actions.
In an interview with the SABC, Professor Paulos Zulu shifts the blame from the racial tension directly to the instigators.
So I think as South Africans, we must, by all means, make sure that before we make pronouncements, particularly dangerous pronouncements that might create disorder in the country, we know the facts clearly, or that we conduct a proper analysis. There is a fertile ground for mutiny, put it that way. But once you organize on that fertile ground for your own purposes, which was the case in this particular instance, the mutiny might take any direction.
But for the many families left to pick up the pieces, the correct wording, however deemed fit, will never bring their loved ones back. And for some, it will forever be a painful reminder, much like many of the other tragic events that saw the senseless killings of South Africans. Jade Lee Paulser, SABC News, Durban.